What if we all do this together? What if we're all relying on each other to grow at least 1% each day? Or let's just strive to go a little bit further and be a little more communal. Because if we're not sharing, what the fuck is all this for?
Dude, here we are.
Dude, here we are. Oh my God. I feel like you create these relationships, which I'm super bad at because I just had a little freak out this morning and then I had to read The Daily Dad in order to calm the fuck down. But, there's no time. When you have kids, how old are your kids?
8 and 5.
Okay, so 8 and 5. So my little ones are 6 and 3. And there's just no time to do anything.
Yeah, I know.
And if you're a parent who actually enjoys being a parent and likes being a parent and lives this idea that he can be present all the time, it really fucks with the rest of your life.
No, there's not as much time to just like hang out and do shit because you're already spoken for.
You're literally already spoken for. And these things that there was the Golden Globe nominations and I'm getting all these texts this morning and Zoe and Timothy and Sebastian Stan, my buddy, and Zoe Saldana and all that. And I'm like, wow, that's so great. I haven't seen shit because when the kids finally go to sleep, if we don't pass out with them, which we normally do, my wife and I say, okay, this is our time. We get to actually do something together. And we sit on the couch and we turn on a movie and we go to sleep within 10 or 15 seconds.
Yeah.
And we wake up at 1:30 in the morning on the couch, totally discombobulated, not sure what to do. Anyway.
No, it's very humbling. I was thinking about that the other night. I was in my son's room putting him to bed, and I got an email about I did this book for this guy George Raveling, who's like one of my heroes. And anyways, I'm sitting there. I'm sitting there putting my son to bed, and I get an email that Michael Jordan agreed to write the foreword to this book. And then my son's like, I have to go to the bathroom. Like it just like the contrast of like struggling to put this 8-year-old to bed and this like huge career win. There's something about it that I think keeps you sane. I don't know if this was all I did, if work was all I did, I'm not sure I could, I think you'd lose your mind. There's something good about it.
There's nothing good about it. It's a recalibration again and again and again into this laceration of ego. And it's good. What is it? The 9th today?
Yes.
Literally, I opened it up. I came in here and instead of figuring out how to do this Zoom with you, I read this and it has to do, it's November 9th, wait.
December 9th.
Right, which is something that I talk about often, about being on your deathbed. Parents think about a lot of things. I won't read the whole thing, but they think about the world they're leaving to their sons and daughters. And that you question, the question for you to think about today on a day hopefully quite far from that moment is what decisions are you making now and how will you think about them then? So I often say, my goal in life is to be able to be on my deathbed, be somewhat conscious, and right as I'm taking my last breath, that I chuckle, that I'm able to look back on all this and to say, not only did I have fun, I had integrity, I played with the circus that is, and that I was malleable within it, and that I ended up having, like we're all the better for it.
Yes.
This morning that wasn't happening. So I needed this redirection that you give me often, by the way. I know this is not, but I want to make this podcast about you.
I'll take it.
I'm serious, man. You and I, we don't know each other well, but we text each other, fairly often, and it's fairly familiar. But there is something about, for somebody who's read, and let me just get through this, that somebody who's read Marcus Aurelius a long time ago, and the reason why you read it, unlike you, the reason why I read it is because I want to know that I've read it, as opposed to the content. Do you know what I mean?
Okay, sure.
And I think that that's the young me who's like, okay, I read this, I read that, I read that, I read that, I'm in the know, I'm in the know, I'm in the know. And then there's the practical application of utilizing this stuff, and that you've made so accessible and digestible that not only have I sent your friggin' book to about 200 people, and I don't do that. I'm not a namaste kind of guy. Do you know what I mean? It's like, oh, I have another book for you to read to make your life better, even though it doesn't work. And then I'll end up giving you another one in 2 months. And then I'll give you another one in 2 months. And then, that's why the bookstore is 75% self-help now. And
Yeah.
when it used to be about as big as the poetry section. But I do believe that these are so helpful. They're incredibly helpful in your life because it parallels with, maybe because it's an idea that I have of, you know what, this is super messy, often painful, really overwhelming at times, and that's the way it should be, because that's
Yeah.
what develops character. And you fall and you get up and you try again, and it's progress, not perfection. But you keep going no matter what your ego is telling you shouldn't be doing, and you should be resting in comfort, and you should you should sleep in every day, and you should let the nanny take over and do all that. So I salute you
Well,
for
that's
that,
very
man.
cool.
You make my life better. You make our lives better.
Oh man, well that's incredible. No, I can tell you're a reader. It's interesting, right? Most people don't read, and then there are some people that read, but then you can tell they kind of only read self-help, and I have no problem with that. But you're right, there is kind of been a creep where self-help and sort of nonfiction has taken over more and more of the bookstore. But I could tell from your book and from talking with you that you're clearly someone who loves the written word. I could see in your book that you were trying to write a real book, not either a memoir or a gossipy thing, or even just your own experiences. You were you, books have it seemed like books have been a big part of your life for a long time.
Books, not only have books been a major part of my life, and my mother and my dad is not a reader for sure. My mother was a reader, but of all, she would wake me up at 2:30 in the morning and say, Ted Bundy just did this awful thing to this woman. You have to come up here because I'm scared. She'd read these horrible true crime books, and she read really fast, and she remembered everything. Her what she
Interesting.
retained was 100%. But she wasn't reading any great literature, and I think it was because of my friend Anthony Zerbe. It was because I got turned on to maybe On the Road when I was like 18 by a buddy, and read that. And what I think is interesting, and I'll finish that thought, but what I think is interesting about reading On the Road is you're so taken by that movement, the movement of that book, and the verbiage of that book, and all that. But you get into this Kerouac idea of first thought, best thought, no edit, and all this kind of stuff. And then, like most things later, when you become an adult, you find out
Complete bullshit.
that total fucking bullshit, absolute horseshit, that he spent 7 years editing that book after doing his first book, which didn't sell at all, which was kind of a typical formal 400-page book, and that his editor just kept pushing him to refine, to refine, to refine, to refine. And I think the process of writing this book and caring about writing, I think the biggest lesson was when I started to edit,
Hmm.
and really, clarify, and what am I trying to say here, and what am I trying to convey here. And it was one of the great lessons for me. And I talk about ego laceration. I mean, just like, okay, I know, and I have to be honest with myself that I'm colorizing just to colorize, because I think it may, it may stand in for just a bad sentence. So I'm
Yes.
going to distract people out of this bad sentence with more colorful bullshit. And yeah.
Well, and it just the cognitive dissonance of I spent time putting this together. I can't just delete it. But you have to. Like I have to cut 20,000 words out of the book that I'm doing right now,
Yeah.
and it's fucking agonizing. Like I usually wake up excited to go to my office to write because
Yeah.
creativity is generative,
Yeah.
to wake up and be like, no, no, today is about deletion. It sucks. I'm so mad about it.
And 40,000 words is a lot. This book, this is the UK version, but this
Yeah.
book is it was, I think there was only two people I sent it to. It was Zev Bora while I was writing it, Zev Bora and Ethan Cohen. And I knew that they were both people that were going to be honest with me. They weren't going to stroke me. And it was probably, I sent the book and it was probably around 95,000 words. So it was 400 and something pages at that point. And Ethan goes, fuck, you want me to read this? Which I thought was great. And then he had some amazing notes. I mean, he really raked me over the coals, and it was part of the reason why I had a lot more poetry in there. And he said, they're going to kill you for the poetry. Not that the poetry's bad.
Yeah.
The poetry is actually very good, but they're going to kill you for the poetry. And it's little things like that where I go, okay. And once you start deleting, there's something really satisfying about it, you know, where you realize that you want the book to be this thick because you think, or at least the adolescent part of you thinks that that it validates you as a writer more.
Yeah, there's more discipline in a sparse book than in a long book. And one of the tricky things that happens is as you become successful in any domain is that both the audience and the gatekeepers who are allowing you to do the thing, they become more indulgent of you.
Yeah.
So you get away with more, and you have to have this kind of inner discipline to go, like, I'm sure they would have published an 80 or 90,000 word book from you. They would have published whatever you wanted, but you had to say, I'm not going to let myself get away with that, which is a different struggle.
And also, you know, you're writing, sorry, at least I knew I was writing something that was, I mean, for lack of a better word, unconventional in that I wasn't spoon feeding kind of celebrity fodder.
Yes.
Do you know what I mean?
Well, I totally know what you mean, because I just had Matthew was just out at the bookstore, Matthew McConaughey, and I feel like your two books are interesting. They're sort of two unique books of a similar, where you have a creative sort of artist who's sitting down. They could write a celebrity tell-all memoir. They could also just write a very indulgent sort of personal introspective book, but both are somewhat different takes on the genre, which I found to be refreshing.
Good. Refreshing in what way? I'm curious.
Well, just not what you would expect. And, you know, what I was thinking about when I was thinking about both your books is that you both had very unconventional, strange childhoods, but he seemed to have emerged relatively untraumatized by his, and yours really fucked you up.
Matthew didn't have any wild animals at home.
That's true.
Matthew had wild humans. He had wild humans.
His parents were wild animals.
His parents were wild, and and I think that's what really, you know, I sent the book when you're looking for a blurb or whatever, and I don't know Matthew well, but I know him well enough, and I really respect him, and I loved his book. And, you know, the thing is I judged Matthew's book long before I read it, which I'm sure people do with this.
I do that all the time.
And then I started to read it, and I went, holy shit, the honesty. And I was really taken with the honesty. There's another memoir out there, and I'll go back to Matthew, but Yersa Daly Ward wrote a memoir called The Terrible. And I met her. I read the book, and then I met her, and then we cast her. She's an actress also, and I cast her in Outer Range and directed her in one of these Outer Range episodes. It's so nakedly honest. And I think that's, when I read that, I was like, okay, I wonder if I could do that. I think that was really what sparked. I wonder if I could write a super honest story, you know, memoir of sorts, but really like our memories work in vignettes and paintings and anecdotes and all that kind of stuff. So therefore, you don't have the kind of linear timeline. But so I was thinking about blurbs, and once I wrote this, and I was feeling really naked. I hadn't sent it to anybody. I did send it to Bob Dylan, knowing that there was no way in hell that Bob would, you know, ever give anything, but I did it anyway. Fuck it. And then I sent it to Matthew, and Matthew wrote back. I think you and I talked about this. He went through, I mean, he literally went through slowly word for word.
Yeah.
And he had incredible notes. Not that I asked for the notes, but I thought, well, how fucking arrogant that he's writing notes. And at the same time, I'm reading them. And it wasn't just, you should fix this, you should do this. I'm a writer now. I'm a best-selling author. It was from the care. It was like, I get you as a human being. I felt this entire book, and I want this to be as good as it can possibly be. And if I can help you just with that, if you use anything, no. And he also wrote a lot of like, I loved this, and I loved this, and I love this. And I thought it was one of the best blurbs I've ever read in my life. It was a well-written blurb, and it felt like a visceral blurb.
Well, I'll send you a video, but I have a video of him reading it out loud.
Oh, really?
At the office. So I'll send it to you. But no, he did the same thing. You held up the Daily Dad earlier. I sent him. I'd blurb green lights, and I said, "Hey, can I call in this favor? I have this parenting book coming out. Can I send it to you? It's like 1 page of parenting advice every day." And he was like, "Yeah, send it to me. I'll see if I can read it." I wasn't expecting anything. I thought he would say no. And then he's like, "Hey," I just get a call from him one day. And he's like, "Hey, are you ready? I've got notes." And I was like, "Oh, great." And we spent like 2 hours on the phone, an hour on the phone. He gave me like page by page notes on this thing, which I, again, wasn't expecting, was incredibly grateful to get. You're expecting like a line. You're like, I want you to just say like, please read this book. And instead he gave me this blurb and all these notes. But I think that is the wonderful thing about books when you, it's a small community of people that read books, and it's a small community of people that really love books. And when you tap into that, there's something I think very special about it.
Yeah, I do too. And when somebody actually cares and somebody's into it, they almost feel emotionally invested in it, which I love. You know, I just gotten here, I'll read this to you if you just bear with me for a second.
Yeah.
I wonder if I can find it here. What's been great about this book, and where I think I'll tell you, there it is. Let's see. They make us fill out actual paper. Once AI takes over, all the inefficiency will be gone. So I want to celebrate the mess while I still have it. The last vestiges of humanity will be a customs officer with a rubber stamp in a humid port somewhere in the world. Your book, too, is a celebration of that fantastic, thrilling, painful soup some of us seem to swim in. On that note, I'm going to hoist anchor and head south, but I'll be thinking about your book for a long time to come. And I like that he says it doesn't...
Who is that?
This is the guy named Joshua Davis, and he's a writer. And I felt like a lot of the responses to the book have been really emotional, really personal. And unlike most books, you have your first week where it does really well, and then the second week drops, and the third week drops. We're getting, like, the first week was good, the second week went down a little bit, and now we're getting word of mouth, and it's starting to grow again. And people are, because I think the people that expected... a typical, like, I did Graham Norton with Cher, and we talked about the book, and there's this thing about ghostwriting and people who actually write their books and all this kind of stuff. And with Cher, you want to know, what happened in those 9 days with Greg Allman. I want to know, and I get it.
Of course.
I do get it, and there's a certain bit of information within, this legendary icon that you want. With this book, it was a little bit different. It was seeing through, to me, it's, a story about parents and children. And it is about trauma, and it's about surviving trauma. And it's about finally growing up and having to grow up and look at yourself in the face and say, what choices do I want to make? And how can I get out of blame? I don't want to live a life of blame. They did this to me. This is how I was raised. This is the nurture of it all. So therefore, I don't have any control of it. And this is just who I am because of what they did to me. And I see, I see it in a way that's non-victimized and positive. But I remember when I was reading Matthew's book, there was a moment where I was like, And this was long before I was thinking about having read Matthew's book when I was writing, and I had finished maybe 40,000 words of chapter 1, and at the beginning of chapter 2, without telling anybody, I said, I have to write something more inspiring. I have to give people a place to go. I have to leave them with a Daily Dad or a Green Lights or something instead of just police lights. And I wrote 50,000 words it was just a hint of something. And my Kimberly Witherspoon in New York with Inkwell Management, my lit agent, she read it. She read that draft and she said, chapter 1 is really good, really well written. I don't think there's a lot you have to change there. It flows well, blah, blah. And then she goes, what the fuck happened with chapter 2? And I tell you right now, like emotionally, I felt so seen. And a lot of times when you feel that exposed and seen, you just want to run. And part of me did want to run. But I go, what do you mean? And she goes, I don't know. It just doesn't sound like you. What happened? And then I told her. So she actually, like, as a great editor, even though she's not an editor, she called me out. And she goes, I have a sense of who you are as a writer. Do your writing. Don't write for an audience.
You were trying to say what you thought people wanted you to say as opposed to what you felt compelled to say. And
I'm guilty of that. I'm guilty of that. And it's just another great lesson of like, look, all you can do is do what you do and put it out there, and it's going to be received however it's going to be received.
Totally. I feel like whenever I am performing for the audience, I'm doing shitty work, and whenever I am following what I find to be interesting or important or urgent, that's my best stuff.
Cool. Yeah.
Well, so I'm actually writing about Elon Musk now a bunch in this book that I'm doing, as I find him fascinating and terrifying. And I found this line from his first wife, and she was saying, inside the man, there's a small wounded boy standing in front of his father. and I was like, well, I mean, that explains a lot, right? Because his dad was a monster, is a monster. But that's also explains a lot of us, right? And I felt that sort of coming through in your story, that you were this kind of scared kid trying to figure it out. And that scared kid lived a long time. Like that scared kid made it maybe up through middle age.
And I remember when my dad said to me, and he meant it professionally, he said, I remember when you went to war. And if you contrast my brother and I talk all the time, and we're close, but the truth of the matter is my brother lives the most simple life you can live. He couldn't simplify it more. He knows when he's going to go to work, he walks there, then he goes to the coffee shop, then he goes to the sandwich shop after that, then he comes home, and then he watches whatever he watches. And then I think what my dad meant by that of like, you fought, you were not going to be subservient to the trauma. You weren't going to allow yourself to fold. And I think it's interesting that you bring up my dad because, I know that there's a lack of stories with my dad, and it's not meant to hurt. It's not meant to be, I think it's honestly laid out in a way of like, okay, so where were you? Were you there?
It's a statement in the book by omission, is how I read it.
Exactly. And it's not about like, we had this crazy mother that was so full of high octane gasoline for whatever reason, who had wild animals around, who, created this narrative that most people, I think all people, couldn't sustain. So even great friends of my mom would just say, pull the fucking car over, I'm out. And we'd be in the, and there's a story that's true. Joyce, who got out of the car 50 miles from anything and was willing to walk, then, sit for another minute with my mother in that car, which I understand, which anybody who knew her understood. The other side of it, she was so much fun. She was so adventurous. She just had this energy that she wanted to be in the nucleus of the circus all the time. But when you have somebody who's living in fear of that person, who's supposed to be the paternal force of that family, and you can't help but become the surrogate father. You are suddenly, the husband. And my dad, he talks about it. He doesn't, I'm not saying anything that he wouldn't say, but he says, I remember your mom being in the driver's seat, you being in the passenger seat, you guys arguing, and he was in the back with his hands over his ears. So you go, it's not a great thing to say, but the truth of the matter is that you took the child role and I took the husband role, because there was something innate in me, and I see it in my youngest daughter, that was just willing to go outside when it's freezing cold with bare feet on, and she has that thing. I saw my youngest daughter, Chapel, do that yesterday, and I was like, damn, that's innate in you. You can't create that. Whereas my 6-year-old is like, it's cold and I don't want to go outside. And I'm like, where are my high heels? And, I think that there's something about that father thing. And my dad's not a monster. He's one of the nicest guys. I just think that he was controlled by a fear that he was unwilling to confront.
But that it struck me that the work of the book and the journey of your story was to kind of reparent that inner child, to sort of calm things down, to develop a sort of a more stable and calm and nurturing environment, one that you didn't have growing up. But that is difficult work, and it's expensive work, it's painful work. And what I was struck by, as I've been studying Musk, is like, he just hasn't done that work at all. He's just like, more stuff, more craziness, more attention, more money, and then you can watch the sort of cyclical effects of that trauma. But what I read your book was, you had this sort of disorienting, overwhelming, confusing, traumatic childhood, and then that rippled out into your life, and you have slowly, steadily been trying to make sense of it. And I even felt like the structure of the book was illustrative of that, and that you're jumping around. You're like 1972, 2006. You're bound. The dates are all jumbled, but as you go through the book, as you get older, as your life starts to coalesce, it kind of jumps around less, and the threads start to come together, and you've kind of made sense of it.
Yeah, and Elon, there's also another element of Elon Musk is maybe motivated by that trauma, whatever that trauma is. Sure. So you start to rely on that trauma being your fuel. Yes. You know what I mean? Trump, doesn't he have the same thing? And that whole, a dad who just didn't accept him the way he was. Didn't W have the same thing, where the dad, it was supposed to be Jeb, and he was the golden child, and W was the misfit, and was the one that just wouldn't live up to a standard that they expected of him, and all that, which I don't have. That's a very different thing. So maybe that's why I'm more contemplative about it.
Yes.
But my dad wasn't somebody who, but he did do that. There was I tell a story. I try again. I don't want to throw my dad under the bus because I love my pop, but whether it's a generational thing or not, I remember I went to my dad once and I said, hey man, I'd love to get a recorder because my mom died early and I wish I had done this with my mom. I wasn't suggesting that my dad was going to die anytime soon, which I didn't want to, convey. But I said, I would love to get together with you and just like with a recorder and just talk to you and ask you stuff about you growing up in Newport and moving to Westwood, and what was it like? What was your dad like? What was your mom like? Did you spend any time with your grandparents? Whatever it was. And he got really defensive. He was like, for what? I was like, and I wasn't writing the book at the time.
Yeah.
And I said, I just, because I want the information, because I love to know like how you think and, what made you do certain things. What was the car club like that you were involved, shy. Why did you become an actor being such a shy person? What was that confrontation like? And all that. And he was really, really reticent. Whereas if I asked my mom it would have been forever, just
Sure.
forever. But again, it's a different mentality, and it's like, so did that motivate me to want to be more? And I'm sure it did. Want to be more intimate with my kids, to listen to my kids in a different way. So I can never look back on that and say, oh, I got fucked because it created something. And not that I don't, and I said that to Howard Stern, not that I don't indict it. There's things that I do indict. There's
Sure.
things that I think are so narcissistically not okay, and it's like, is this about you, or is this about celebrating a child?
Yeah.
You couldn't help it but make it about you. But I think that, a lot of what motivates me now, having 4 kids, is how do you celebrate those children knowing that it's all going to be messy. It's
Yeah.
all super messy, and it's okay that it's messy. And a lot of these self-help books that I read, say, hey, look, there's a problem, find the solution, live in the solution. And I go, what the fuck? What about all the stuff that happens in between? What
Yeah.
about all the messiness? And I think bringing it back around to you, which is why I love all the stuff that you've written, truly all the stuff that you've written, is it reminds you again and again how messy all of this is,
Yeah, there's this concept in Stoicism that I don't think is super popular, and I struggle with it, which is this idea of acceptance. Because people go, well, I didn't get where I am by accepting things. But when I think about my own childhood and my struggles with it, and why I still have anger about some things today, and where it causes me problems, is all the areas where I'm still stuck in a place where I'm like, it shouldn't have been that way. It's unfair that it's that way. Why did it go this way? Like when I'm stuck in, like, if I can get to a place where I'm like, it is what it is, it shouldn't have been this way, but it was. And now I have to deal with the reality of what it was. Then I'm moving forward. But the problem is when I'm still stuck in the unfairness, or in the wishing it was otherwiseness of the situation.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's exactly right. And by the way, that's an AA thing. It's an
Yeah.
AA thing of acceptance and, accepting it, but not shutting the door on it. Look, it existed. It might not have been great, but it's already happened. What are you going to do about it? And if all
Yeah.
the energy goes into why couldn't it have been different? I was talked to a guy last night. He was like, I'm not going to tell you who it is, but he was like, I have this burning when I pee. And I was like, okay, what are we going to do about it? And he's like, but he was stuck in the why me.
Yeah.
And I was like, I'm going to go down a litany of things just to tell you the stuff that I've dealt with in the last 2 years. And you can't live in why me. You're like, this exists. You know what I mean? There was another guy who wrote me last night. It was with his best friend who has stage 4 cancer. He's not going to make it. And he went down this list, because I do a gratitude list with a bunch of different guys. And I've always loved the idea of having to be responsible to somebody else for a list, as opposed to
Sure.
just keeping it in-house. And he went and he said, just like, it's all they were talking about on his deathbed, in crying, laughing, doing all that, is all the shit that doesn't matter. And how
Yeah.
obvious it is when you're on your deathbed, truly on your deathbed, knowing that you're leaving a 3-year-old behind, which this guy was doing. I mean, it doesn't get clearer than that. It doesn't get more real than that. And it sounds so morbid. But the truth of the matter is that's when you go, yeah, I accept my life. But what if I look around now, what do I have that there is to celebrate? Not in a denial, not in a delusion, but what do I have? Oh, you and I are doing a podcast right now. I can't get the thing. And it's not, Chrome is not letting me do the thing. Well, let's just not fucking do this. And I go, listen, man, I'm so excited about talking to you about things that actually matter to me and you're talking about kids, and you're talking about how to live your life, and you're talking about how to embrace your life with what you have, how to celebrate what you have. It's all good shit.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I imagine
imagine
as you
as you
tell the
tell the
story in the
story in the
book
book
about
about
getting
getting
stabbed,
stabbed,
as you
as
were
you were
bleeding
bleeding
out in
out in
Costa
Costa
Rica,
Rica,
you
you
weren't
weren't
like,
like,
here are
here
the
are the
things
things
I'm
I'm
mad at
mad
my
at my
dad
dad
about.
about.
That's not popping into your head then.
It's not. No, all that's and to me the greatest part of that story is when I called the mother of my older kids, Debbie, and I said, "Listen, this is what's happened. I was in the ambulance, and I said, this is what's happened. Can you do this?" She goes, "I know what to do. You're going to be fine." And there was something super calm about it, and she had gone
Yeah,
through enough chaos with me to say,
yeah.
"This isn't the worst of it, brother. Like it's all good, you know."
Well, I totally relate to that too, because there is this kind of, women are more emotional. There's all these stereotypes, but my wife is way more stoic than I am. I have to actively practice this stuff. She's the one that is intuitively and naturally stoic. She jokes one of us is a stoic and the other writes about stoicism,
But
but like the reason I'm writing about it and working on it is because I'm fucking terrible at it, right? And sometimes you need that person who's just like, this is gonna be fine. Just it's all right. Yeah.
It's what it is. It's like, why are you
yeah,
writing this? Somebody said, I don't know where I read it somewhere. I've read 1,000 books, and this is the worst book I've ever read in my life. It's like, that's so, I see it as a positive. I go, it's being reacted to in such an extreme way, and that's a good thing. That's not a bad thing. But what would you have rather me not written this book? Fuck you.
No, it's like Dumb and Dumber. You're like you're telling me you read it.
you did read it.
Right, right. And that's I'm working through, which I think I've not worked through, accepted. It's not working through.
Yeah,
I don't think you work
sure,
through
sure.
stuff. I've done a
Yeah,
ton of therapy in my life. I was telling somebody that I was working at a story that's in the book, place in Lower State Street in Santa Barbara called Rocky Galenni's, which was like a mediocre restaurant. It was a lot of fun, one of the greatest bars in the whole town. But that I was working in there, and I was using that money, and I was seeing a therapist. And not all the money, but I went and saw a therapist a couple of times because I had this softball in my gut and I didn't know what it was. And I didn't tell anybody I was doing it. I found a therapist, and then I was, another story I probably should have written in the book. Halfway through the therapy session, I looked over and the guy was like this. He was asleep. I was like, I go, "Dude." And he goes, "What?" And he defended himself. And I think I was 14 at the time or something. And he said, "Look, I'm still listening to you, but I work all day and I have kids at night and I'm closing my eyes. I'm basically resting my eyes." Anyway, again, all these things that you could take as ruinous to your life,
Yeah.
I now, for several reasons, accept as just part of this wacky, absurd circus that is pretty fun most of the time.
I've never put a therapist to sleep, but I remember one time I was talking to a therapist and I was sort of going on, about my childhood or my parents, and she finally goes, "I don't know what to tell you. This isn't like, this is what you got this go around." She's like, "You didn't get what you were supposed to get. I don't know what to tell you," And it was so helpful because yeah, it's like what I'm coming in here and talking about is how I wish that it had gone differently. Like I'm trying to argue it into of happening differently, and that can't happen. And so what acceptance allows you to do, acceptance doesn't say that it's okay. Acceptance allows you to move on. It happened. They dropped the bomb.
Yeah.
Should they have made a different decision? Yes or no? We could talk about it all day, but they did do it. So what happens next? It's all about what happens next. What are you going to do about it?
How do you rebuild? How do you rebuild?
Yeah.
If you find it catastrophic, how do you rebuild?
Yeah.
And I agree. There's many, yeah. Anyway.
I watched your thing on Graham Norton with Cher. I thought it was hilarious, and it made me think. There's this story that I love in Seneca. With Seneca, he grows up in this province of the Roman Empire. He grows up on this estate. he ends up in Rome. He comes back later in life, and the sort of childhood home that he grows up with is in a state of disrepair. These trees are dying. There's this old man, and he walks up to the old man, and he's sort of upset with him for not taking care of the place, and he's sort of berating this person, and then he realizes that the old man is a kid he grew up with.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm referring here to the story of Cher confusing you for your father. He realizes that the old man is someone he grew up with, that he was a kid when he was a kid. And then he realizes that all the trees that are dying were planted when he was a kid. And that's when he realizes, like, oh, I'm an old man. I am looking in the mirror. And there's this kind of memento mori of, like, we think that time is moving for everyone else, and then it's staying still for us.
But that's where emotionally where we're at. So he goes back to that childhood home, and he's emotionally the age that he was when he left it. And you go, and how much did you evolve out of that age? And that's one of those great, I mean, it's a great fable, or, where you question yourself of how much have I accepted an entire life trajectory. When she looked at me, and I know there's that other thing too that you're talking about, when she looked at me and and the kind of like, it's so great to see you again. Look, and I was like, I don't know you though. I don't, and I just kind of went with it, which I normally don't. I'm normally, if I don't recognize somebody or if I don't know somebody and they go, hey, how are you? And I go, I don't remember your, where did we meet? Or I try to be honest about it. But it's Cher. So you're like, okay, I'm gonna run with this. But more than that, we had such a ball. We had such a great banter. And she's talking about me being her boyfriend. And I said, look, it's not over yet. You never know what can happen. And whatever it is, this 78-year-old woman who was so, what I got from her is this mischievous and playfulness with it all. That I really adored. Again, just another great example of somebody who has taken a life that's been all over the place, and had major trauma in it, and major moments of having to accept something that's out of her control, that she could have pretended that she could control and didn't. And what came out of it was this woman, this 78-year-old woman who was so attractive to me in every way. I mean, literally. I mean, she looks great, but it was this vivaciousness that, it was, Kira was great there and Michael was great there, but it was all about me and Cher.
Well, I'm sure you have a version of that experience too, where, because you were like a kid actor, you were like the young talent, right? And you can kind of get your identity stuck there. Like for a huge chunk of my career, I was always like, I was so young, people were like weirded out that I was there. They're like, how did you get here? What are you doing here? You're like the young kid going places. And then you wake up one day and you have gray hair and it makes perfect sense that you're there, right? But your identity is still of that kid who maybe doesn't deserve to be there, or that you think people are going to be suspicious of you. And I bet that's been weird. That must be weird as an actor, where you go from playing a kid to playing an old man. Like you're and then, but your identity is somewhere between those things.
Totally, because also you're being accepted. There's an element where the audience is accepting you in a certain way, or you're trying to, I don't dye my hair. If I would, if I had to for a role, or lose weight or gain weight or whatever it is. But it all happened in 1 year. Outer Range, a show that I did for Amazon, and Dune, where Dune, I was called Old Man, and Outer Range, I was playing the grandpa. And I was like, when the fuck did this happen? And it literally happened in 1 year. Those are the two things I did that year. And you go, wow, but at the same time, what comes with that, it's like Sebastian Stan was just nominated for 2 things today. And when he did The Apprentice, because I did W, he called me and he said, I'm freaking out. Like, how do I get into this? How, somebody who exists and somebody who, so there was a great vulnerability that he came to me with, or it just kind of hit me, and I go, wow, I'm that guy. I'm not
Yeah.
the kid on the Goonies that has no idea what he's doing, that's reading every book on Stanislavski and Antonin Artaud and the theater of cruelty and the poor theater and, all this stuff to try and accumulate as much information I can with zero experience and zero knowledge of how to kind of utilize all this information. And now it's been 40 years of utilizing information and, trial and error and all this stuff, where I would sit in a corner and slap myself in the face and want to be like Brando or want to be like Montgomery Clift or James Dean. And then at some point, like with this book, at some point you find your voice, you find your technique, you find your writing style, and you don't have to write like Kerouac anymore. You don't have to write like, you try to write like Norman Mailer, you try to look at these master classes and go, God, if I could only write like that. I remember there was a great story of Hunter S. Thompson writing out, I can't remember what the novels are, but he'd written out 2 novels. I think one was Hemingway and one was somebody else.
Yeah, he just wanted to feel the words go through his fingers.
Even though none of the words were his. And I understand that. And as you're going through different writers, and if you're, like what you said, truly a reader, and you're going through different writers and you're going, God, I wish that I could be this good. And then one day you just have your voice. And when I read this book, Zev Boro, one of the 2 guys that I sent it to while I was writing it, he said, if nothing else, this book is 100% you. And I appreciate it.
That's about the highest praise you can get, right? Is that you settled into yourself and you did what you were capable of doing.
That's it.
That's what you want in life and with each individual piece of work.
And accepting it and not shame spiraling because of it. There was a moment where I did I think you and I talked about this, the Audible, and I was about
that's the worst.
Oh, bro, there's nothing worse. There's literally
I've done like 4 in this room, and I hate it every time.
Every single sentence of it. I mean, and I read well. I read publicly well.
Yeah, of course.
And I'm fairly comfortable with it. And I'm reading my book and I'm stuttering through every sentence and I refuse to listen to it. I heard it's good. People are seemingly loving the Audible, but I was about halfway through that process and I just started spiraling and I said, I wish that I could burn any evidence that this ever existed as an idea or as a reality, as a manifestation. And then I came to the other side of it, which is I am who I am. But it took a while, and I'm not somebody who spins often. I mean, but I spun.
Well, somebody told me, and they might have just been being nice, but there's something about, and there's also probably a metaphor in it. There's something about the way you hear your voice and then the way you hear it in a recording. Because when you hear it coming out of your mouth, it's vibrating through your head.
Oh, yeah.
And your ears are picking it up differently than when you hear it on a recording. But there's something just totally mortifying about hearing your voice come back to you. Just as there is, you work on the pages of a book for months and months and years, and then you have to read it out loud, and you're like, who's this like poser, right? Like this guy sucks, because you're getting it reflected back to you in a different context than how you made it. Can you watch yourself on screen?
Yeah, I can, and I'm pretty objective. That's why everything that you're saying doesn't necessarily pertain to me because I do Comcast, I do voiceovers, I do, I hear my voice and I can objectively, I'm fairly good at being objective and saying that doesn't sound right, that doesn't sound, I know where the sweet spot is, it rhythmically. Yeah, I was listening to Matthew a while, probably I don't know when his book came out, but 2 years ago, listening to his Audible, and he reads super fast.
Yeah.
He reads really fast. And I was like, oh, okay, well, if this works and he's reading fast, and I always felt like he had to slow down and all this kind of stuff. But when I to answer your question, when I watch myself, even during No Country, we would go and watch dailies and all that in a trailer all together, and it was really like, am I in the zone here? Am I doing what needs to be done for the story, as opposed to, oh God, you said that line so bad, and oh, please don't use that, oh my God, or why'd you look? Did you just look at the camera? But with this, I think it was because of because it was so naked and so raw,
Yeah, you had 40 years of thick skin in the other domain.
Yeah.
And then you have almost none here. And when you go out on a limb, when you do something that's unexpected or unusual, if you were suddenly to record music or something, I think you'd probably have a different sensitivity to it because you haven't built up that callus of I know more than you, so I know if this is good or not.
And I also, what we talked about in the beginning, writing has been, I think painting, acting, I've had a strange relationship with that I think has changed recently. I think because my dad was an actor and what that represented, and there was a celebrity, aspect of it that really irritated him. And so there was all this other stuff that came, whereas writers don't, for the most part, maybe you're the exception, become celebrities, where it's like, you wrote a book and, what's a good sell on a book? You sold.
The numbers are very small.
They're minuscule. And when like Dana White, posts something and says, 900,000 people saw this post in your book in an hour. And you go, oh my God, so does that transfer? Let's say it transfers to 5%. That's a lot of books. No, it transfers to like 0.000001. Yeah. And you go, wow. But writing has always meant, I think, the most to me, writing and painting. Because when I was traveling, I took off. I remember my mom was like, she didn't want me to do this. And she goes, I'm going to call the cops and I'm going to have you jailed. I was like, I'm just going to Europe. I'm just going to backpack through Europe. This is a good thing. And I did a double episode of Highway to Heaven with Michael Landon. And I took that money and I took off to Europe, and I meant to go for 6 weeks, and I ended up staying there for 6 months. And I just loved it. And I had the Eurail pass, so I would sleep on the train and all that. But I was reading a lot of books then. I spent a lot of time alone, so I was lonely, even though I traveled with people who I met in train stations and all that. And so it was all about bookstores and museums. So there was this relationship with books that gave me a life when I was super lonely, and with paintings where I would go into in Florence to the Uffizi for 8 hours at a time and just stare at paintings. And I still have that relationship with paintings. I still have a thing where it's not like, oh, there's an affectation of, I collect Jamie Holmes and I also collect Daniel McKinney. I go, no, these things have like visceral meaning to me,
Well, I bet that's what it is that because your father grew up in movies and TV and you saw it as you would have seen Hollywood as an industry town, right? I think this is the interesting part about the sort of the Nepo baby discussion that people miss is, sure, there are a bunch of advantages, but the biggest of the advantage is not access, it's demystification. Like Steph Curry obviously gets a bunch of genetics from his father, but growing up in basketball arenas and being a basketball player as a job was probably the greatest asset that you get, right? You go, oh, this is just a thing. But so for you, as acting gets demystified, books and other forms of art probably get elevated, right? Because you saw them as being more pure or different, even though it's just as much a nuts and bolts, we slap a cover on this thing and we hope it'll sell a couple of copies. Like, even though it's publishing to me is that industry, I imagine that probably contributed to why doing a book and doing an audiobook was so tough, is because you had extra mystified it in a way that you know how a movie comes together.
Yeah.
It sucks at the beginning. And that's the biggest asset.
But I also think it's just another, like why my dad became an actor. He talks about movies and he talks about, having that fear and confronting that fear. And I think the difference, and especially in doing, I remember when I was 21 or 22, I did a play in Rochester, New York called Pitts and Joe, and my dad came to see it. And he was confused afterwards. He said, "I don't know how you did that." And I played a guy with traumatic brainstem injury and who had gotten into a motorcycle accident. In the play, he goes back and forth. So you'll go into kind of past sequences where the lights change and he's fallen out of his wheelchair and then he'll be normal. And then suddenly he's back to being just traumatic brainstem injury. But I think the difference is, and maybe this has to do with it's in the book and whatever trauma or however you want to look at it, just an unconventional, wildlife upbringing, is what makes people do what they do and why. And I think that's been the innate fascination for me, which would make sense as opposed to just being for me and paying for my own therapy at 14 years old and going, none of this makes sense to me. And nor does it still doesn't make sense to me. Why do people do what they do? I've seen people who are the most calm freak out. I've seen people who I consider or deem bad do amazing things and, full of compassion and all that. And you just never can kind of pigeonhole anything.
Yeah.
And again, you go back to this AA thing and you go, listen, man, everybody deserves a chance. And you see the guy who's on the street and he's drinking, a half gallon of vodka a day. And you go, well, that guy will never get it. He's done. He's over. And then you see that guy 5 years later and he's thriving. And you go, wow, I never saw that coming, So I think that's always been, I know it's everybody's fascination, but it's always been this insatiable fascination with me of why do people do what they do? And this, like what you were saying with your wife is the more stoic of the two of you. This is me not trying to figure it out, but feeling like I've come to some peace with, and you go, okay, so let's experience the trauma through this child's eyes, anecdotally, or through a fable, or through paintings, or through prose poems, impressions, all that kind of stuff. And then what has come out of that? A deep appreciation for children, a deep appreciation for friendship, for communal effort. Why is AA, which people see, AA, you don't drink, what's the thing? But it's a community.
Yeah.
And I love the idea of being able to rely on your fellow man. What's a chopper crew? That's a community. If you're going 80 miles an hour down the freeway, you have to be so in sync not to die. And I love that reliance on other people, or what I just said about the gratitude list. Like, I don't want to do a gratitude list myself and I love the sun and I love the ocean. And, and you go, what if we all do this together? What if we're all relying on each other to grow at least 1% each day, a little bit better, 1% better? Let's just strive to go a little bit further and be a little more communal, because if we're not sharing, what the fuck is all this for?
Well, you do seem to be spreading the word about Stoicism, which I appreciate. I've heard from so many people that have heard from about my stuff or about the Stoics from you. I'm curious, what makes you want to talk to someone about it, or when you're saying, hey, check out this book, Meditations, or Seneca, or one of the Stoics, what's your pitch? I'd be curious to hear yours.
The pitch is something that I've already said, and there's the practical way. There is a messiness to life that we have not embraced because we're looking for the comfort in it all. And there is comfort and there is thriving in the discomfort of it all. And certain Stoics, you're saying, I can't remember who it is right now, but who had literally had everything and was doing so great and had every comfort and would literally go outside of himself to challenge himself and eat nothing. Who was it? Was it Nero?
This is Seneca.
And challenge himself and embrace that discomfort, not for a day, not for an hour, because that's cheating and that's not really doing it. But actually challenging yourself in a way where you go, listen, you're almost putting yourself not in other people's shoes, but you give yourself more of an opportunity to be compassionate and to be inclusive when you don't just rely on this thing that is not what am I trying to say? Not just most comfortable, but just wrapped up in your own capsule.
Well, he was saying that the lesson he would practice poverty. He would wear, like, one day a month, he would wear shitty clothes, eat, he'd stay outside of his palace, he'd sleep on the floor, he'd eat bad food, whatever. He wanted to experience poverty, he said, so he could tell himself, so he could answer the question, is this what you're afraid of? Right? The point was to eliminate the fear of the thing that we'd prefer not to happen. Right? You get so used to things being the way that you are, that they are. And that's why you work so hard. And that's why you made them the way that they are, is that they're better. But then you can become almost addicted and dependent on them. And then you become anxious and afraid that they might go away.
Exactly. And and the addictive thing, and forget all about the AA stuff, but the addictive thing, and the habit of something is an idea that I've always loved breaking. I've always loved challenging that. So it's like, there was a moment, around Avengers, and I'm listen, man, I'm in a position where I'm around so many actors who so many different, levels of success, and I'm vulnerable to, maybe I should present myself in this way. So I should only take private flights. I should only do this. I should only convey high success. I should use my money doing that, even though I'll go through the money so fast doing it. And I go, and I'm vulnerable to that because I go, I should be doing this as opposed to resorting to myself and doing my own thing. And I think what your books have done, they've applauded something that I've already chosen, and that is living a life that is as challenging to the status quo as possible. It's like, this is the way you're supposed to do it. This is the way that's acceptable to us. And I go, but I'm not rebelling against that thing. I just want to be able to stick my toe in all the different waters.
Yeah, and to me, resilience is the ability to be okay in just about any situation, right? To be able to go, this is fine. It's totally fine. And that's one of the weird things when you're successful. Stuff goes wrong all the time. That doesn't change. What happens is that people run up to you and they go, is this okay? We're so sorry. Can we fix this for you?
Yeah.
And to be able to retain the ability to be like, yeah, it's totally fine. I don't care where I sit. Like, I can wait. Like, I did a talk the other day and they had to push it 30 minutes and they were just like, we are so sorry. And then I was like, it's fine. I'll just go back to my hotel room. I'll see you in 30 minutes. And then afterwards they were like, you are the best. Thank you so much. And it was like, I went back and I did literally nothing. You're paying me either way. What do I give a shit? But you get used to being that person, and then that person is very fragile.
Yeah, that's why it's good. Taking road trips are good because people don't give a shit, and you're staying in motels, and some things are not clean, and some things are gross, and some TVs don't work, and some people at the front. And I'm very lucky in that way. I've done very well in my chosen profession, but I'm also, and I remember Robert De Niro saying this at one of the heights of his career. He was saying, you'll be recognized if you want to be recognized. But if you're an actor, you should have the ability to be able to disappear into a crowd also. And I remember always taking that to heart. Not that I was in a position then to challenge that, but I think now I am. you know? And I
Yeah.
go, if I'm going around and I'm presenting myself as somebody who needs to be perceived as important,
Yeah.
it's nice to put yourself in a position where you're right sized and you're just another fucking human being getting along in this life, you know, looking to commune with other people, looking to have experiences, looking to be able to share, and feeling lonely, like going back to that place and feeling lonely in Europe. You know, I do. I try to insert myself into that same mentality again and again, because it does create something. It creates something inside of you that wants to express, or that wants to reach out, or that puts your, you know, that makes you extend when you wouldn't necessarily extend. And what you're saying, when you're surrounded by a bunch of yes people, which is the grossest thing ever, you know
Yeah.
what I mean? When you have way too many people working for you that you don't need, you know, and that and I have a really good group of people in that way. I mean, my assistant Erica, who's she's from New Orleans, and I'll be like, I'll do a scene and I'll come down and I'll go, "What'd you think?" And she goes, "Oh, I was reading, I didn't see it."
Yeah.
And I go, and part of me is like, "Well, fucking watch, man." And then the other part of me is like, that's okay. You're doing stuff
Yeah.
that you have to do. And my job is just to get up there and do my work. We just did this thing quickly, Knives Out 3. And it was a
Oh man.
very, very, very challenging role with an amazing director and amazing actors. And I had to give these big speeches, and getting up. And I was terrified, man. I've been after 40 years. I was terrified to get up there. And I was like, do I know my stuff? Am I well enough prepped? And all this kind of stuff. And I loved, there was something, because I think content is soft today for the most part. Maybe that will change soon. I've heard there's some really good movies coming out. But the challenge was I felt adolescent again. And I felt like
Yeah.
I didn't know anything. And I felt like I wanted to go read another acting book to try and, you know, get my footing again. And I liked it. I liked being scared again. I like,
Yeah.
you know, and I think it's a thing that I keep trying to throw myself into again and again, whether you're writing a book and knowing that people are going to come around and go, "This is stupid."
Yeah, there's got to be an element of danger to it, or why are you doing it? To go to your point about staying normal, that is one of the wonderful things about having kids. They just don't give a shit about your professional self. Like I saw someone the other day, and he was with his kid, and I asked his kid, I was like, uh, do you listen to your dad's podcast, or do you watch it? And he was like, oh yeah, I love it. And my son was like, what? You know, he was like, you care about what your dad, like, because my kids don't give a shit at all. Like my son the other day goes, Dad, what do you think the worst book in our bookstore is? I mean, besides yours. You know, like that, they're just like relentlessly busting my balls just all the time. So it's wonderful. But he like to watch in my son's eyes the fact that another kid his age didn't do that was like amazing to him. And I was like, this is actually the more healthy thing. I don't need more people telling me my stuff is good. I need the yawn of indifference from my own family, you know.
The yawn of indifference. No, man, when you surround yourself with that, and there's something so satisfying about it at the end of the day, because you're again, when you're humbled, there's no better feeling than being humbled. You can talk a good game. There's a lot of people, and that's what I love about you too, man, is that, you know, there's a lot of people I know, and there's a lot of people I know, and not that this is self-help necessarily, but that talk a good game, you know, and then you get to know them, and then you get to know what's behind the scenes, and you realize that they're not walking their talk. They're just not. It's just something that they like to pontificate, and they like to be perceived in a certain way. And if you're not walking your talk, to me, you're not worth a shit, you know?
No, I totally know. That's the hard part. Writing about it's easy. Doing it's hard. Last question for you. I'll let you go. But I was fascinated in your story, as of now that I have young kids, is you're on round two, right? So you had kids when you were very young, and I ask this question to people a lot. My friend Casey Neistat, the filmmaker, he had a kid like in high school, and then he has a kid now. His kids now. The getting to do it again. What do you feel like you learned the first time you're doing better the second time? Or how do you think about it, having this second phase of life, getting to try some of these things over? And it's not like you don't have your other kids. You're still a parent.
Well, I know that's what
to round one.
it's what I always react to, is that how do you feel you get to do it again? And again, it always it always makes me feel like my older kids went somewhere.
Yeah.
I love the continuation of being a parent. I will have been a parent my entire adult life. I will have gotten out of high school, had about a year to myself, a year and a half to myself, and then I became a parent. And then my youngest will graduate when I'm around 70. So I will have been a parent raising kids.
Yeah.
There was a little moment there where I kind of was off on my own doing my thing and my kids were adults, but not very long. And I've always been a present parent. I've always had this incredible relationship with my older kids. What's different is that think about a 20-year-old, man. I was, when Debbie was pregnant with Trevor, I was looking at prison time. You know what I mean? So It was a different guy. And even though I think I've always been a very conscientious and good parent, I still had, which is basically what this book is about.
Sure.
I had whatever chaotic vortex that I was living in, that's the nature nurture part. I was still contending with that, and I was still unwilling to let it go, meaning I was unwilling to grow up, because I thought growing up meant kind of some weighted down idea of having to live this monotone life. And I just wasn't willing to do that. And because I didn't know that living the way that I'm living now is so much more vivacious and vivid than anything I ever lived before, it doesn't have the consequence of having to do jail time or whatever. But
it's healthier too.
And it's healthier too. But there's something that's always existed with my kids about their sense of newness and discovery and awe that I think that I treat like people go to church for that reason, or people go see Buddhists for that reason, or people meditate for 5 hours a day for that reason. I feel that is my version of that. I get to be around these kids, and I'm not bullshitting when I say it. I've always felt that it is such a gift that I've been given to be able to be the parent of these 4 children.
I think that's one of the best passages in the book. I have it here. He said, "There's nothing so pure as the young who are just beginning to awe at that investment of a breath, and slowly, so painfully realizing how all the breaths of their passions hang in wait just out of touch. Into their maturity, solace will hide with only a yearning scent of milk left in the air. But there they are. It is there, your own sense of character to be cultivated."
I love it.
That's written pretty well.
It's not bad, man. No, it's good. That the innocence, the sense of discovery, the excitement about things, that's what lights me up. That's the fucking best. That's why that makes the sleepless nights and the craziness and the yelling and the noise and the breaking of shit. It makes it all worth it.
Which brings it all the way back to this, which is what I was saying, which is Daily Dad or Daily Stoic or all these fucking books that I have of yours. Literally, your books are everywhere. That remind me of that. It's like, look, you go through the insanity to be able to be more present for the gift. And the gift is right there. You don't have to seek it. It's not out of your grasp. It's literally right there. I was thinking, oh, look at the opportunities that you're getting now that you're sober. I go, no, the opportunities were always there. I just wasn't available to them. And now I feel like I'm available to them. And you've magnified that. And I'm not, again, this is not, I've done a lot of interviews for this book, man. I've done and
I've seen him.
And I appreciate you more than you probably will ever know.
Well, that means a ton to me. I hope we can do it in person sometime.
Me too.
But this was awesome. I love the book. Like, I got 2 copies with notes. I thought it was fantastic.
Thanks, man.
And yeah, I hope you do another one.
Me too. It's already happening, so we'll see.
Good. All right. Well, hit me up if you ever need anything, and then hopefully we'll. We just missed each other when you were in Austin, but let me know when you're.
I know. Let me see your shirt real quick.
Oh, this is Judas Priest.
Fuck yeah.
I took my kids. I took my son twice. I took him to see Iron Maiden in Sacramento, which is where I'm from.
Yeah.
And then Judas Priest was opening, and so he was telling his 5-year-old brother, who I thought was too young to care about this stuff, and then his brother got jealous. So then they were playing at the F1 track, which is near my house. My ranch is out in the country, and that's where we live, and it's the closest thing is that track. So I was driving him to school, and I was like, hey, you know that band you just saw us playing? And so anyways, they wanted to go see Judas Priest.
We missed Judas Priest when they came to the Forum. I was supposed to go, and I had tickets, and I missed it.
Really?
Oh, dude, Judas Priest when I was a kid, Rob Halpert, and then he was kicked out.
Have you read his book?
No.
Dude, super good. Definitely, he has 2. They're both very good. He's a sober guy. He talks a lot about that. I was shocked, 1, by how good the books were, and then 2, seeing them live, because I saw them once when I was in high school, or I saw Halford performing solo when I was in high school. But I was shocked at how.
When you were in high school, he was already out, right? Yeah.
I was shocked at how many songs they have. Like I'm a fan, but then you're like, oh yeah, because they're not like an 80s band. They're like a 70s band, and so there's like an extra 10 years of song.
Totally. That's amazing. And by the way, Iron Maiden, and I know you have your old Iron Maiden shirt and all that, but Iron Maiden was it for me. I mean, I had Sex Pistols, I had the Germs, we had the punk rock era, but then Iron Maiden was, it was it. Eddie floating above the stage and all. I mean, it was just, that was it for us. And I still, when I was doing Milk, God, what was it? When I can't remember the song. What was it? Number of the Beast, maybe. And when I was doing Milk, I was staying in somebody's apartment right above, what's the gay area of San Francisco?
The Castro.
The Castro. I was staying right above the Castro, and I was trying to work myself up into like a frenzy. And I would eat a bunch of M&Ms, and I would just fucking bang out to Iron Maiden and that song over and over and over. And even though I was a massive fan before, it stuck in that kind of time because Milk was such an amazing experience. But yeah, Iron Maiden, massive, massive impact, dude, massive.
Well, they're kind of a late 70s punk band at first. I mean, Paul Di'Anno just died, but they kind of started as that and then became a heavy metal band. It's kind of a late transition. Dude, in the car this morning, just because we're talking kid stuff, I'm trying to teach my kids about AI and like how it works. So like my son goes, hey dad, do you think we could ask ChatGPT to make a Christmas version of Eddie? And I was like, what world am I living in? This is like the greatest thing that ever happened to me. And he did. This is what it made.
It was like Jack Skellington.
Yeah, look at that.
Wait.
The camera's far away. Let me see how close I can get it.
Oh, no way. Dude.
And then he asked if we could do a black and white version so he could color it. So
how genius. Wait. Get the fuck. You have to send me that.
I will. So that's what we do in the morning. Sometimes what we'll do is we're trying to keep them off screens. I feel like this doesn't count. But I'll be like, what do you want to color today? They like to color. So what do you want to color today? And then they ask ChatGPT to make it for them. And then their drawing ability is not good, but their imagination is incredible. And so they can imagine incredible things, and then it makes it, and then they get to fill it in. So, but I feel like it's teaching them how to use this technology that's going to change the world.
And my kid wants a Christmas Eddie. What the fuck? It's amazing.
Well, dude, I'll let you go. This was incredible.
Sorry we didn't see each other in Austin. I really do. I would love to see you. And, as much as promotionally driven as it all is, I truly appreciate you. You're awesome.
No, likewise, man. This is the best.